Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for staying this long to listen to the last speakers, which is me and Martin shortly. Thank you to BizClick and to EV Live for inviting me on. So, yeah, my name's Sam Clarke. I've been driving EVs for 20 years now, believe it or not, and the first charger I ever used was a stone's throw from this building opposite Lyceum Theatre when there were just 2 chargers in London. And if anyone's wondering, it was an electric motorbike was my first vehicle. So yeah, I've been doing this a long time. I ran a logistics company in central London with a fully electric fleet for 10 years. I had the largest electric fleet in the UK, largest smart charging infrastructure, and the largest vehicle-to-grid network. So hopefully all of those records have now been beaten by somebody else. But yeah, my day job now is Chief Vehicle Officer at GRIDSERVE Sustainable Energy. Those of you that don't know what GRIDSERVE is, our mantra is to deliver sustainable energy and move the needle on climate change. How we do that is through a mantra called sun to wheel, which is very similar to well to wheel, which is the concept of digging up oil, refining it, transporting it, putting it into petrol stations, and then into vehicles. We kind of do the same thing, actually, but it's called sun to wheel. So instead of taking 250 million-year-old sunlight, we take sunlight from the sky on day 1 through solar. So solar power, battery storage, and that's our generation. Our distribution is an electric network across the whole of the UK, one of the largest in the UK, and we have charging infrastructure at 85% of the service stations in the UK at the moment. And then final part of that sun to wheel is the vehicles. So we lease to businesses and to consumers electric vehicles as well, but of course all zero tailpipe and no hybrids, I'd like to point out. So that's what GRIDSERVE does. Now, the topic I thought it was up behind me, but it's not, is around the charging dilemma and what are we going to do. The first thing I'm going to say is that if I was representative of the whole EV industry right now, I think I'd have a couple of black eyes and a broken nose, because we've taken quite a hit in the last month from the media, from all walks of media, a lot of EV bashing and a lot of misinformation. And so I thought I'd take the opportunity to have a little bit of a kickback. Because it's important, I think, to understand if we're going to have a charging infrastructure that supports the uptake of EVs, we need to understand the basic knowledge much, much better. We've had the likes of Mike Parry, who calls himself a serious journalist, on the Jeremy Vine show, saying that EVs are a con trick that were invented by this government, whereas I'm pretty sure it was a Scottish inventor in 1832, but you know, one of us is right and one of us is wrong. He also thinks EVs will suck all the electricity out of the national grid. The national grid doesn't make energy, it doesn't sell energy, it just moves it around. We're not all going to be driving EVs tomorrow. There will be enough energy, and there's lots of very, very clever people like Graham Cooper who will be able to give you much more detail about how the grid will cope. We've got Nigel Farage. We all love him, don't we? EVs are more expensive to run than petrol cars. No, they are not. That is in one very, very small use case. Possibly at the moment with energy prices very high, then yes. But for the wide general public, that is just simply not true. And then we've got Giles Corran from The Times, who seems to think we're better off walking. Well, I live in the Cotswolds in Cheltenham, so if I walked here, I think I would have been quite late. So what I'm trying to say here, I suppose, is we've got a lot of misinformation, and if you are going to look at the media news, then please do make sure that it is fact-checked. Make sure I say that right. And the last bit of statistics, which I think comes into what we're going to do in terms of charging infrastructure, is what the government thinks that we need to do. Now, the latest transport strategy document suggests that we need 300,000 chargers. Now, in order to understand what they mean by that, you're going to have to read the document. It's 137 pages long. On page 128, I think, and Annex 5, it breaks down what that number actually means. But what I'm going to say to you is it doesn't matter. It's not about that number. It's all about, and I think Sarah Sloman from Paythrough said this earlier on her panel, it's about the right chargers, at the right places, at the right time. It's not about a big number that frightens everybody. And what we really need to understand first and foremost is a differentiation, put my teeth in, to what that number really means, or what we actually need in this country. On the one hand, we need lots and lots of low-powered, slow chargers, which are being used and being operated by your vehicles when you're doing something else, like sleeping or working. That is one element. Low power, lots of chargers. Similarly, for companies like GRIDSERVE, we need to support people that need less amount of chargers, but more power in more specific places. And that's very, very important as well, because again, as I think it was also Sarah that said earlier about the proportion of people that don't have off-street parking and therefore need another solution. So it's very, very important that we break it down into the things that really matter and make sure we have high power charges in the most appropriate places. GRIDSERVE as an example, I'm going to come back to that, aren't I, because that's who I represent. But we have over 500 chargers now across the UK in over 190 different locations, I think. We've built several hubs, new hubs over last year, I think over 100 high-power chargers, and we have hundreds and hundreds more planned for this year alone. And we're not the only non-oil company charge point operator that's also building out things at a very, very fast rate. So I guess my overarching point and my summary is to say, please don't believe everything you read in the media, and if you do, make sure that it's fact-checked. We will be able to support the uptake of EVs. The infrastructure will be there for your needs, and it will come in the time frame that we need it to. But bear with us. The vehicles have just started, and we have a lot of people that say to us, oh, it's all about the charging infrastructure. And we think, oh, God, yeah, you're right. I hadn't thought about that. We've been thinking about this for years. The National Grid, the power companies, have been thinking about this for years. So we will be ready. EVs can come, and we will support them. So that's me. That's my soapbox. I'll get off it now. And thank you very much for listening.
Sam, I'll just take one quick question from our online audience, and that's about rapid charging infrastructure being accessible, affordable. How important is that in helping people make the switch to EV, making them feel confident to make the switch to EV?
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, one of the myths that we often have to bust is electric vehicles are expensive, and yes, their capital cost is higher. To use public charging infrastructure is higher than if you were charging at home. One thing that we often do when we talk about things, whether it be from GRIDSERVE or from the EV Cafe that I also do with some of the other people in the room, is talk about how total cost of ownership is something that's really important. We've got to understand the mechanics of your fuel plus your vehicle. In the same way, we've got to understand what the charging mechanisms need to be for public charging accessibility versus people who have the privilege of being able to charge at home. If we, as again was said earlier, if 50% of the people in the UK don't have access to off-street parking, then they're going to need to use public charging, and that needs to be affordable. Unfortunately, at the moment, the people that have the luxury of being able to afford an EV also probably have the luxury of a driveway. So those on lower earning incomes with smaller cars in the future need to have a solution as well, and we need to make sure, as an industry, that we can provide a cost base for those users that have access only to public charging that is affordable. And that's something we've all got to work towards, and hopefully as energy prices continue to come down, we'll be able to make that more affordable to more people.
Okay. Sam, thank you very much indeed. Well, we'll be moving on to our next keynote in just a moment, and final one of the evening, but one more round of applause for Sam Clarke, please.
Thank you.